Hi guys, Paul here. Welcome back to the Anfield Review. Hope you're all keeping well. Yes, another week ticks by. Let's run through the week of all things Liverpool, guys. Let's get straight into the nook and cranny of everything that's happened in this World Cup bonanza of a week. Yes, we've seen Iraola give his first press conference. Look, he's been incredibly well prepped. He's very savvy. He showed great awareness. So I'd say savvy, prepped, showed great awareness, came across very personable, came across essentially ticking all the boxes that a Liverpool fan really hopes for, isn't it? Let's be honest. Very engaging, very, as I say, very aware of the sort of critique, I suppose, of what was Slot in terms of really the engagement, the awareness, the acknowledgement of sort of where we are, where we want to go, what we require, for the club, the team, etc. Really moving forward. So look, the reason I didn't bother putting up a video really in terms of that press conference, I just don't feel the need to constantly put a video up on every inch of everything that happens with Liverpool because let's be honest, it was good. I mean, it was great to hear him talk ultimately, but there wasn't really any sort of earth shattering sort of information. It was more the look, he's been very well prepped. I mean, the very fact that he, I suppose, ticked every box that a Liverpool fan would want, ultimately is he would have to have incredible sort of natural intuition and awareness of us whilst managing Bournemouth, or the fact that he's been incredibly well prepped, which is honestly I've got no issue with either. On that front, at the end of the day, came across really well, ticked the right boxes, and look, proof will always be in the pudding. But so far, so good. On that front, very pleased. Look, I personally prefer his communication style in slots, but I don't want to spend the whole year comparing the two. But at the moment, it's natural to compare him to Jurgen than it is, and obviously Slot. And so, look, he's more in the direction of Jurgen. He's not quite as effervescent or as energetic as Jurgen naturally. But yeah, look, no complaints. Ultimately, he wants signings. We want signings. Now let's get the signings. I think ultimately is the key, isn't it? Um, I don't honestly. I think where we're at the moment in terms of sort of the weeks just seem to sort of tick on round and nothing really seems to be happening apart from the fact that for once we haven't actually lost anybody this week. So you've obviously seen that Szoboszlai signed his new contract today. Look, it is great news. I'm not going to say it's not great news. But equally, I suppose to some extent, I'm just more relieved that he signed than I am than necessarily overwhelmingly excited. Mainly because I've just seen so many players over the recent time, sort of run their contract down and go for free. Or every single minute of every day seems to be somebody looking to leave or running their contract down. So finally, it's quite nice to actually see one of our top stars, really extend the contract. Look, the club of I'm not sure whether they necessarily wanted to do it so early into his contract, but because we've been burnt so many times, now that we're sort of facing the new reality of, well, look, you've got one option or the other option, and and we can't necessarily extend the deals on our timeline anymore because our timeline doesn't exist. Our timeline, how we'd like to give new deals out, essentially coincides with basically when players are more than happy now to just walk their contract down to nothing and then walk out the door. And that doesn't matter whether we're winning the league or not winning the league. Look, at the end of the day, you have to put some modicum um, of reality to the situation that look, the players that have walked on a free either been through our choice or in Canate and Trent's situation, they've gone to Real Madrid. At the end of the day, better players than both of those that have walked out the door, to Barcelona and Real Madrid in the past. And so it's not fun, but equally it is what it is. So yeah, did I want to sort of do a massive headline saying breaking news, done deal, some sort of clickbait scenario? Not really. Look, ultimately, I'm relieved. I'm happy. I'm glad that he signed. his new contract, but equally, two things can be true at the same time. If he hadn't signed it, it'd have been like, seriously, what's going on? It's a bit it's a bit like two sides of the coin. If he doesn't sign it, then literally nobody's signing the bar Gravenberch, and it is just a mass exodus out the club. And so I am happy, I'm glad, but equally I've been incredibly sort of concerned if he also didn't sign his new contract, because it just would have been a continuation of what we've seen. So yeah, that's really been the highlights of the week, hasn't it, so far? Obviously, we know the situation with regard Edwards. All focus is, I mean, from what I hear, Julian Ward is jet setting around the world to really try and develop some sort of interest in some of the buys that we want to make. I don't know where the club is at the moment. I mean, if you had last season and it didn't pan out how we wanted it to, but if we thought last season was the epitome of Liverpool moving quickly, and negotiating hard deals. Like, for instance, there seems to be a running theme over the last sort of 4 or 5 years where Liverpool tend to really only be interested in buying the vast majority of players that have a release clause. Because and people go, oh yeah, well, that's smart business. It's like, sure, but not every player is going to have a release clause, and you can't just constantly just be going after the players that only have release clauses, because that limits your market greatly. And so it also and I've mentioned it before, it puts a major question mark on your ability to negotiate. If you can only buy players that have got release clauses, then the only negotiation you're really doing is with the player. You're not really negotiating with the selling club. And so that doesn't really speak that much sort of volumes in terms of your ability to win players. I will say, look, Isak didn't have a release clause and Verts didn't have a release clause. And for that, obviously I think Frimpong did last summer. And for those two, they get a lot of credit. Obviously, they haven't paid off so far, but they do get a lot of credit for being able to negotiate those fees. Where we're at now, I'm hoping we aren't only looking for players with release clauses, because the market's limited already in when it comes to wingers and defensive midfielders, which is what we need. I know we're looking for a right back as well, but we are looking for a defensive midfielder, and we are looking for wingers. There isn't a phenomenal amount of those. I think ultimately we're going to have to, at some point, we can't just sit on the Barcola track. Look, I want Bradley Barcola, but it ultimately, if that doesn't come off, can we seriously be stuck here in mid-August? Are we literally hitching all our train to that Bradley Barcola train, a bit like Isak to some extent, saying like we're just going to ride that train all the way to the end of August, and if it doesn't come in, what is the break last option? What is the break? What is the cut-off point? It'd be great to hear your thoughts, guys. When is enough, and when do we put a deadline in the sand and say, well, if we can't get him by this point, then we're going to move on. But the problem that you've got is that if you go so far down, we obviously went down Jan Diarmid, even though he'd expressed his desire to go elsewhere over many months. We went down that, no doubt, based on some information. That didn't really materialise at all. And then we've gone down the Barcola train where, look, if it comes off, my only view on this situation is I would get a defensive midfielder in now, like right this second. There's 40 hours, 50 hours a week. There's about 4 or 5 people in the club working on transfers. Ultimately, that's 200 hours a week. That's more than enough hours to be able to find a defensive midfielder and a right back. And so whilst we're waiting for Barcola to make his decision, or whatever the chips need to fall with PSG, my viewpoint generally is what's holding us up getting the midfielder and the right back whilst we're waiting for that. And I will also say, I think we have to make sure we're not left with our trousers down, essentially. Because if we're sitting here in mid-August and Barcola decides to stay, or PSG don't want to sell for another year, all the options could be off the market to some extent at that point. From my point of view, I would go, and I put it before it came out sort of widely known, I would go and buy Hassan from Spain. I think he's in the second division in Spain at the moment. I'd go and buy him for 10, 15 million. Worst case scenario, okay, we've got a another young winger, but equally we've covered ourselves with at least enough cover if the worst case scenario happens and Barcola doesn't come through. I think we've got to play smart. We've got to think with our head at this point. Get the defensive midfielder in, get the right back in, get that done before August. Doesn't, they're not that hard a positions to fill. Get that done before August. So get that extra winger, get that defensive midfielder, get the right back in. And if you want your superstar winger, and we all want Barcola, but if you want to hitch yourself to him, great. It's a cherry on a cake. Yeah, it will put us closer to maybe contending, for the league. But equally, if it falls apart, we're not left with an absolute crisis. Look, I don't know whether there's a cut-off point where we say realistically we got no chance of getting him. Let's get Minter, let's get Rayan. I don't know, but that's what my viewpoints are, guys. I just think that there's plenty of other business that we can get done whilst we're waiting for that. The whole summer isn't dependent on that. My real worry at the moment is we're spending way too much time focusing on just one area when we've got so much else to be doing. We should be silent, making these other signings whilst we're waiting for that. I think the second part is we really do need to be moving. We really do need to be moving a lot quicker in this situation. The last season we moved like lightning. This season it feels like we're moving like a tortoise. I know you've got Edwards leaving, you've got Hughes going out the door. Well, then ultimately, if that's the case, then the onus has to be on the others to really pick this up and take it forward. On that front, there's also a nagging, I suppose, anxiety from my perspective. I don't know whether you guys feel this one as well. Last season they always mentioned it was 3 windows in one, and we all said, okay, well that makes up for all the previous 3 or 4 windows where we didn't spend hardly anything. What happens if they meant one of those windows was this window or the window after? I know that sounds crazy, but what actually happens if one of those windows was actually including this window? As in, we're sitting here expecting X, Y, and Z to be spent, but in reality, we think last season's summer was really making up from the previous summers that we never spent hardly anything. But does that include this summer? And so we're expecting 180 million to spend when in reality that may not be happening. Is the sole reason why we aren't signing these other elements based on sales? It's food for thought, isn't it? And people go, "Oh, Paul, you're paranoid." Maybe I am. Maybe I am. But for the sands of time, ultimately, there's always a correlation. When we got Diaz, I thought, great, we've got some more depth. Did we only get Diaz because we knew Mane was leaving? I don't know. I honestly don't know, but it seems that way. Did we get Xhaka knowing Kanate was leaving? I don't know. We don't seem in a mad rush to get another centre back at the moment. I know. Look, you could sit there and say, yeah, but they were still negotiating. Maybe they were. Maybe they thought it was never going to happen. Maybe they were future proofing. It's all it is hypothetical, but it's one of these situations with us. Usually, what we think and what has happened are 2 different things. We hope that at the moment where we're sitting there thinking that nothing's really happening, that everything's happening and all the cogs are going full steam ahead, you would think in reality they're working 24/7, 7 days a week at the moment on transfers because we badly need it. I'm a little bit nervous and a little bit miffed by the sort of, there's a section, not so much of the media, I suppose. There is a section of the fan base that is way too happy or content with the current squad and maybe just a few tweaks, given how bad we were. And look, I think to some extent they are the people that ultimately were putting everything down last year to the tragedy and to the training and into injuries, and that they are those people that really put a lot of it down to that and just don't see the reality of the midfield. And look, you unfortunately you, they they just won't see the reality of the situation. I would never tell somebody not to be really upbeat and look forward to the season, but I do think if you're coming to this season thinking that, but you know what, the squad isn't that bad. 2 years ago we won the league. It's like, yeah, bear in mind what we've lost out of that team. You could say, oh yeah, but the midfield's still McAllister, it's still Szoboszlai, and it's still Gravenberch. It's like, yeah, true. But this is the Gravenberch that regressed last year. This is a McAllister that was horrendous last year. McAllister, we were very quick to rip Fabinho apart when Heaves' legs went and Henderson's legs went. McAllister's no different. I'm not saying he doesn't have attacking ability. I'm just saying without a defensive, we've got enough players that all want to go forward and and nobody that wants to help the defence in the midfield. That's my big issue. Is I just it's not the fact that I don't think McAllister can play. I've said it. He'd probably have a good World Cup. He's had an all right World Cup. He does look McAllister to the end at 27. He should still have a shot on him. He should still score. He hasn't lost the ability to head a ball or shoot. It's just he hasn't got the legs anymore. And so that's really where I'm at on it, guys. Ultimately, I feel that I'm a little bit twitchy, a little bit anxious, would feel much better. Yeah, right back would be lovely as cover. Frankly, I want to see a defensive midfielder in. I don't know if it's going to happen. I really don't. I mean, there's for every one person that's like me that sees the reality of where our midfield at, there's another person, there's somebody else that will just say, yeah, but those midfield three are fine, plus Jones and Tranioni. And I'm like, look, I like all five of them, but none of them have the characteristics to be a central defensive midfielder. They're not. None of them are. And the problem is that some people don't care about that. Some people generally don't want to have a Mascherano, a Fabinho. They just want a possession-based midfield that can spray the ball around and create opportunities. And like, look, I want that, but I don't think that's really. Yes, we could do with somebody that can pass a ball like Gerrard or Alonso, but equally we badly need somebody to help out the defensive side of our game. And I don't just nobody seems look. I get it's not sexy to actually have players in the team that actually do the hard yakka and put the hard yards and defend, but this team badly needs it. We have one aged centre back in Virgil. We've got youngster centre backs. We've got got a young left back. We haven't even got a guaranteed right back at the moment. You've got an aging keeper in Allison. Like we badly need some of the midfield to actually really get their finger out and help on the defensive side. Yeah, I mean, I was like, yeah, look, they ended up, you could sit there and say, yeah, but Paul, goals win games. Like, yeah, I get it. I get it. I ultimately don't have a solution to the situation of we all know Isak can't play 3 games in a row and he's going to have to be rotated. What is the solution? At this moment in time, I have no idea because at this moment in time, it's Gakpo. Yeah, yeah, I know. The sharp it's like me being clipped round the head at the same time, isn't it? The sheer thought of Gakpo being the only striker we're going to have we're gonna have Isak on one weekend, then the next game he's gonna have to be rested. Then they're gonna be Gakpo up top with Rio and Muniz. And it's like, yeah, sure, I get it. Like even if Verts plays amazing, he still can't play as a striker. Yeah, I mean, there's just so much for us to do. The irony of irony is we moved like the wind last year for buys when we didn't necessarily have urgent needs. I would like to centre back. I would like to DM last time. I didn't get either of them. Ironically, I already got Leone in fairness. And this summer when we needed to move incredibly quickly, Xhaka was done in January. I would argue we probably needed buys in January, like Man City did with Gay and Semenyo. We didn't do that. So it's like, well, yeah, I'm not pulling down Xhaka. I'm pleased we got Xhaka, but equally, we did nothing in January when we needed it. Do you know what I mean? And we didn't get Gay last summer. So, really this week, ultimately, we've had a press conference from the manager. I'm very pleased how it went, guys. Be great to hear your thoughts. Very personal, very aware. He wants to get in touch, really get, sort of have the lines of communication with the fans in a way in which we want, essentially. But equally, ultimately, the litmus test is always what managers are like when results aren't going well, or when people are asking the very tough questions. But look, he's got incredible awareness. He pretty much answered everything how you'd want him to do it, And so, look, we've all got high hopes for Iraola. I didn't put a video out just to say, well, there's been a press conference ultimately because he didn't really reveal anything bar the fact he wants players. Well, look, ultimately it's not a case of him wanting players. We need players. It doesn't take rocket scientists. There isn't a Liverpool fan alive that doesn't realise that we all need players. It's just a question of whether you feel we need two, three, four, two, three, four, five, or six. I'm of the camp that bare minimum we need a DM, a winger, and maybe a centre back that could play right back. I'm of the opinion we need three. Two, if we sold nobody and we got a DM and a winger, I still don't know how we're going to square the circle of get bridging the gap to Ekiteke. But ultimately, I don't know. I don't know what the answers are really. I mean, I think whoever we buy on the wing is going to have to shoulder some of the scoring prowess. That, or we find some miracle solution to Isak's fitness. Yeah, but as I say, that was it really for the week, guys. We've had the Iraola press conference. We've had Szoboszlai, sort of sign his new contract. As I say, is it breaking? Yes, I'm pleased that he signed a new contract. Is it a new deal, in the sense of a signing? Look, sometimes, yes, sometimes you don't celebrate the people that are with you as much as you need to do. And, people say, oh, you're always looking for new things. I was like, yeah, sometimes that's the case. But I would argue in this situation, is like we are all very relieved that he signed a new contract. Am I excited? It's hard to be excited at the moment because I have literally no idea what direction the Liverpool are in. At the moment, we don't have any depth at centre back, no right back, no defensive midfielder, one striker up until Ekiteke comes back, and no real right winger. And so it's one of these weird situations at the moment. We are really looking at, sort of Isak, Muniz, Rio, and Gakpo as four from what, one, two, three. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe the problem is Wirtz can't play off the left, and he may have to. It depends. It's we do lack a lot of depth, guys. But I'm only telling you things that we do know. What are my thoughts? Are honestly, I'm so miffed at the speed that we're moving, and regardless of the World Cup. People go, oh, yeah, not many other clubs are actually moving that quickly. Well, ultimately, one of our deals was done in January. So we've done one signing. I would argue we need to do more signing than anybody else. People would say, oh, but you spent so much last summer. I was like, yeah, look what we didn't get last summer. The reality is, whilst we got two very shiny, amazing toys, equally, well, yeah, and obviously Ekiteke is great as well, but whilst we got Wirtz, Ekiteke and Isak, equally, we didn't get a CDM, we didn't get a proper right back, as Frimpong's proven he's not really a right back. Is and the problem is what nobody really seems to care that much about is that we're hemorrhaging players from the squad. We sold loads last summer and people walked. We've lost 3 this summer. Yes, Robertson's gone and Simmons has come back. Yeah, great. We're the same. Salah's gone and Muniz is coming. Yeah, great. And people go, oh, yeah, but Kanai's gone and Xhaka's coming. It's like, yes, I can also do the maths. And so the 3 people have gone out and we've got obviously those players that have come back in. But the reality for Liverpool is asking Muniz to be Salah. Nobody's, we really are expecting Isak and Verts to really carry the load in terms of the goals situation on that front. Um, and asking Xhaka to hit the ground running. I know it's going to be between him and Leone, but it looks like, there's not really any cover for Virgil to get any sort of rest. I would say so far, we haven't really moved at the speed that we need to move. And sure, they'll say, well, people leaving and all these different things. It's like, bottom line is, that you don't have time for excuses. You just, it's the 18th of July. We need to have at least one of a defensive midfielder or the winger solution in before the start of August. I would prefer that we get the DM, the right back / centre back, both in before August. Look, in an ideal world, we have all three signing. The whole club at this current moment in time should be focused on two things: signings and getting Rio's contract sorted. That's it, bar nothing. I don't care about anyone else's contract at this point. You've got nothing else for the rest of the year to do. Once you've got those signings done, spend the rest of the year on everybody else's contracts extensions. But for the next 2 weeks, we need to be working like hamsters on the treadmill and literally have a list of 5 DMs or 10 list of 10 DMs, cost, buyout clause, etc. And literally it has to be bang, 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 bang. And we have to be a little bit realistic as well. Look, I love us going for Barcola. Are we going to get him? The question is, are we just speaking to the agent, or has the club actually said that he's up for sale? We're not privy to all the moving parts, but this is the situation. Are they only going to sell Barcola if Demi comes to them? But if Demi doesn't come to them, they're not going to sell him. So what are we going to be stuck at? There must be a definitive idea as to whether that's going to happen or not. And are we just going to hitch ourselves to that bandwagon all the way to the end? And what happens if Barcola suddenly goes to Barcelona or Arsenal? Be great to hear your thoughts, guys. This is very much around a Saturday round. Well, yeah, early Saturday roundup of the week. Unfortunately, I wish I could give you some signings, guys. I really do. I'd hope we'd have. I generally didn't think it was rocket science for us to really get one of the defensive positions and also a DM in for the door by this point. Am I underwhelmed? Yes. Yeah. I mean, is it a disaster? Look, we're on July the 18th. It's not a disaster. I think if we're sitting here around about the 5th of August and we haven't signed anybody else, then we're heading for a proper Titanic. Because this squad, as we speak, doesn't have anywhere near as much depth, not even remotely close. It didn't have it last season, and we all know this. The manager said it as well, and so we shall see. At time will reveal all. Ultimately, that the club isn't not getting signings and to sabotage their own self. Obviously, so we all know they're not deliberately not trying to get the signings, but ultimately there does need to be a severe amount of urgency, like a steam train coming through now, because it takes time to get deals done. It really, you can't just snap your fingers and 3 players walk through the door the next day. And so we shall see, guys. Hopefully next week I'm able to provide you some updates with some actual tangible news, frankly, guys. We've got the pre-season sort of friendlies coming up. I'll be watching those, see how the youngsters do. It's always a good chance to see, what youth's coming through, what's down the pipeline, who's the next Trent, Gerardo, and Fowler. Boy, it would be lovely to have a couple more coming through. Well, look, we're going to see. Look, one thing we do know is we're going to see far more of our youth team next year than what we did with Slot. We know that's definitely guaranteed, but it's a big ask. When our youth players were coming in under Klopp, that was fine and dandy. It was a much easier setup to come into. This one, we are in transition. Ultimately, We don't have the superstars up front. Um, and the ones that we do have, i.e. Verts, still we need him badly. He has to pay off next season. There's not an easing into the process. He has to come good. You can't have 2 seasons of next and not much output. Not when you're spending 120 million. If you're spending 30 million, maybe, but 120, he has to be the superstar. We put a lot of stock in it, and we have to find a way to keep Isak fit. And we have to find a way for the team to work as one. And if we're not going to get the superstar DM that I want, then make sure the whole midfield actually, work like beavers, put teams under pressure, and actually defend as a unit. Look, sometimes if you don't have the DM that I want, and I feel the team badly needs, then the only other solution is for the ones that are there to do something that I didn't see anything of last season. So it'd be great to hear your thoughts, guys. You enjoy your weekend. Have a fantastic weekend. It is literally like a heating bonanza in the UK at the moment. So I'm keeping this balding head well and truly wrapped up under covers. So you have a fantastic weekend, guys. Speak to you more soon. Take care.